We recap 2 days of group stage action at the World Junior Championship. We'll talk about Macklin Celebrini playing out of his mind, Frank Nazar's masterclass in playmaking, and a lot more on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakash, joined by Sebastian High, and on today's show, we'll be breaking down 2 days worth of World Junior Championship action. We'll start off with day one, which includes Switzerland versus Slovakia, Germany versus Finland, Czechia against Norway, and to end things off, we'll talk about Canada versus Latvia. We'll talk about Macklin Celebrini playing out of his mind. Adam Guyon standing on his head. There were so many good storylines for day one. And we'll end it off with day two, which was really good as well for a second segment. We'll talk about USA versus Switzerland and Sweden versus Germany. 2 great games that just happened today. We'll get into those in our second segment, and we'll end things off with our 3 stars of the day for day 2 and day 3 of the group stage action. We'll get into that and a lot more. Before we get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets on any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started right away with Slovakia winning 3-0 against Switzerland. And this game was very, very tight. Both goaltenders played out of their mind. But Adam Guyon takes the cake for me. This was he was not letting anything through. And Switzerland was trying, and they were sticking with this game. Rodwin Dionicio played a fantastic game. The 2 draft eligibles, Leon Mugli and Danilo Stinkov on defense had really, really great games. The forward core for Switzerland was trying really hard with a lot of determination to get past Slovakia. It was 1-0 up until the third period. Like, they were in this. And then Slovakia scored 2 empty netters to end the game off. Like, this was a tight game, and the least boring 1-0 up until the last minutes of the third period type of game we've seen in a long time. And yeah, I love Adam Guyon. Like, he's made for these tournaments, right?
He really is. And I mean, I think we both had our questions of just how high he got drafted, which was overwhelmingly based on the tournament last year. But he really is made for these tournaments. And we'll see if he's able to leverage that for a long-term NHL career of a similarly high level. But at the very least, he's cementing himself as a Slovakian World Juniors legend, because these performances are just like home run swing after home run swing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember there was one particular save that made me think immediately, like, oh yeah, he's winning this game single-handedly for Slovakia. There was a cross-ice pass and a one-timer, and he just covered the entire crease left to right and just swung his hand up and caught it. And I was just like, oh yeah, no, this is Adam Guyon's coming out party. Like, this is he was good last year, but this year it just seems like he's made this his tournament. Like, it's his now, and he's not letting go. And yeah, I feel bad for the Slovak backup, because you're not seeing a minute of ice time. Like, it's not happening.
It's unfortunate,
he's playing out of his mind. But moving on to the second game of day 2, we'll talk about Germany versus Finland. What a fantastic game that was, right? I'll let you take it away, because these are your boys. Absolutely.
My boys, they played very well. I missed the first around half of the game because it was a little bit early. Still, I slept in yesterday. But what I did catch was just awesome to watch. Like, this German team is one of pure determination and with every single player buying into the philosophy of the group and the game plans. And that performance against Finland was just spectacular. Like Germany's first ever victory against Finland in this tournament, and they earned every single inch they got in that game. It was so much fun to watch. And yes, this is not the strongest Finnish team we've seen in the last couple seasons, not by a long shot. They're missing their best player that would be eligible for the roster, Joakim Kamel. They're missing one of their best other players who was cut off by the deadline by like 6 days, in Brad Lambert. And it's a very young team, but still playing against Germany, it probably should have been like a 5-0 win on paper. But this German team is far outperforming what they have on paper, and it is just so much fun to watch. I love it.
Yeah. They don't quit. That's what's ridiculous. And yeah, I mean, this is a Finnish team that isn't to the level that it was before. They've got a decor that's fairly good. The offensive forward, I mean, the forward lines they're decent, but not overwhelmingly good like they were in previous years. I don't think they have a bona fide goal scorer, a bona fide top end, player other than maybe Kasper Halton. And even he was playing on the second line, I think. Emil Hemming is a really good goal scorer as well, but he was playing in the bottom six. I thought that this Finnish team really lacked that bona fide difference maker, that dynamic element. Konsta Helenius is their first center, and I like Konsta Helenius. I think he's going to be a great player. It's just at his current level, I don't think that he's there yet, right? So they're missing that element, and it was really clear they didn't have the guy to make the key pass at the key moment in order to tie this game back up, and to keep him up by one or that kind of stuff. And their goaltending pair was rough as well. Nicholas Koko, I thought, didn't really have the best game, and Finland played the day before. Like, all these play into account, but even with all that, I thought Germany wasn't supposed to have a chance on this one, but their goaltender Dietel played out of his mind. And they had one defenseman who I really like. I forget his first name, but it's Hubner. He was amazing. He was genuinely amazing in that game. He scored a goal. But beyond that, he kept things in control when his team had the puck, right?
For sure. Like he's been putting in some really good performances for Germany so far at this tournament. But yeah, it was just a great game to watch beginning to end, and watching the highlights and watching all the goals I missed live was also very, very fun to watch. But there were some other games yesterday as well that I caught in their entirety. So I'll have a bit more to say on those. Like there was the Norway versus Czechia game, which was a far more convincing performance for Czechia than we'd seen against Slovakia. And both Yuri Kulik and Edward Shala scored hat tricks, and they are the offensive centerpieces of that team, and they are the ones that should be producing. So when they do, Czechia wins very convincingly, but when they don't, it's a very different story.
Absolutely, yeah. And you mentioned Czechia having a better game overall. I thought Yuri Kulik, night and day versus what he showed versus Slovakia. This was a much, much better game. I thought he was the leader for that team on the ice by far. Put in a performance that really doesn't make you doubt the Sionis jersey. And yeah, overall, there's no doubting, like, Yuri Kulik is for real. And this last game against Slovakia, I think, was really just a fluke. I'd be surprised if this kind of issue continues. But let's close things off with the biggest. I mean, this was a rough one for Latvia. Canada versus Latvia, 10-0 the final score, with Canada scoring 5 goals in a third period alone. Macklin Celebrini
is good at hockey.
Yeah, I mean, did you see the chin hang on his on his cage? Like, we all knew he was gonna get into this and be good at hockey, but like, oh my goodness, less than 14 minutes and he scored 5 points. Fun fact, by the way, Macklin Celebrini in this one game against Latvia matched Adam Fantilli's total points collection from last year at the World Juniors. Adam Fantilli had 5 points in 7 games. Celebrini matched that total in one game against Latvia. Yes, it's Latvia, but it's not like Adam Fantilli didn't have an opportunity to face bad teams and get lots of points. Celebrini's able to. Yeah. What did you think about Celebrini in this game?
Oof. I mean, he was Canada's offensive dynamo. He was their creative force. He was the centerpiece of the team for every second that he was on the ice. And I think that the fact that he still hasn't crossed that 14-minute barrier in any of the 2 games so far at this tournament. Should change. We said the same thing after the first game, so hopefully the third game is where the coaching staff entrusts him with bigger minutes at 5-on-5. Like on the power play, it's obvious that they trust him. Like when he has space to work with, when they have control of possession, the coaching staff has a ton of trust in Macklin Celebrini. But he is just as good at 5-on-5 as he is on the power play, and they have to discover that because there's not a single player on that Canadian roster, in my eyes, that can even come close to his level of skill. There are others that are more refined, like Matthew Poitras is a more refined hockey player right now than Celebrini is.
Yeah.
But no player comes close to the raw skill or the game-breaking ability that Celebrini has. And if Canada wants to hang with the giants of the tournament, with like Sweden and the States, when they do eventually face them, they're going to have to be feeding Macklin Celebrini all the minutes they can to give themselves the best shot at winning those games.
Absolutely. It's not like the top 6 is necessarily having good performances. Matt Poitras is struggling. Easton Cowan is struggling. Fraser Minton is struggling. Like there are opportunities for him to get into that conversation, and I think he absolutely is. And by merit alone, should be in the top 6 instead of some of these guys. But some of these guys made training camp out of rookie camp in the NHL. Some of them actually even played NHL games. Like I understand the optics of putting a draft eligible ahead of him, but when he's performing like Celebrini is, like this was a fantastic. Like he was dominant in this game, and I really think that at the end of the day, it'd be a mistake to keep him out of the top 6 for long. I think once you hit the medal rounds or even the quarters, I think it's time to just push him up if he keeps playing like this. But that wraps things up for our first segment and day 1 recaps. Day 2 rather recaps for the World Juniors. We'll get into day 3 and the breakdown of what happened there. We'll talk about everything from the USA versus I'm blanking. Sorry. But that wraps things up for this first segment and our breakdowns of day 2 of action. We'll talk about day 3 of action here. There are only 2 games played today: USA versus Switzerland and Sweden versus Germany. We'll talk about all that, what happened in those games, and who stood out after these messages from our sponsors over at FanDuel. But that wraps things up for our first segment and a recap of the 4 games of action in day 2. Now we'll talk about the 2 games of actions in day 3. We'll talk about USA versus Switzerland and Sweden versus Germany. 2 very interesting games. We'll talk about those after our messages from our sponsors over at Sleeper.
The new NHL season is here, and it comes with all sorts of possibilities. Your favorite team could hoist the Stanley Cup. Connor Bedard could score 50 goals, and you can get in on the action with Sleeper. Sleeper is our #1 choice for your daily fantasy hockey needs here at the Locked On NHL Network. Because with Sleeper, all you have to do to win 100 times your money is correctly predict 8 specific player stats. And you can get creative with those. They can be guessing a goal total for a star of the league like Nathan McKinnon, or some of the young studs of the league like Leo Carlson. The choice is yours. So use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability.
Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we'll talk about USA versus Switzerland and Sweden versus Germany. 2 very interesting games that occurred today. Both teams, all 4 of these teams, there were some very interesting names in there that had some great performances, but I think we can start with the blowout between USA and Switzerland. It wasn't even close. It was an 11-3 win for the USA. They scored 5 goals in the first, 4 in the second, 2 in the third. And overall, there were 2 players that stood out more than the rest. And I know Carter Gauthier got 4 assists, but I thought there were some real concerns with some areas of his game that I've mentioned before on the podcast. His shot selection is a headache. And it prevented him from getting even more assists. And outside of him, I thought the second line had a fantastic game. Frank Nazar put out an absolute masterclass of a playmaking game today. 4 assists, and all of them were clean, crisp, tape-to-tape assists, where he created the goal himself by finding a passing lane that no one else saw. That was a fantastic game by Frank Nazar, right? Let's just start there.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, I'm always happy to see Frank Nazar succeed, and especially considering just how difficult his D+1 season was, where he's out most
Yeah.
of the year with injury, couldn't really crack high into the lineup at the end of last season with Michigan because of all the studs they had ahead of him who'd already been established that year. And even this season hasn't been the fastest start production-wise for
Yeah.
him in the NCAA, but the player that had both of us rank him second overall in that 2022 draft class is still there, and he really, really popped out today. Like the pace, the determination, everything centered on getting the puck to the slot, getting himself to the slot, and just wreaking havoc in any way he knows how with a really versatile toolkit. It's just so much fun to see. And while yes, he put on a playmaking masterclass in this game, his goal scoring is also a real strength. He has a great shot. He gets to goal scoring positions really well. And with the puck on his stick, he has the confidence to be a true dual threat. And that's also what made this playmaking performance so good. Was
Yep.
there were multiple plays I remember from this game where he had a shooting option and instead he went for a passing option after attracting the defender, creating that space, patiently waiting, which is of course easier against Switzerland than other uh, teams in this tournament. But
Yeah.
still, it was a very, very patient, composed, creative, and skilled performance for Frank Nazar, and that brings me so much joy.
Absolutely. But we have to talk about Jimmy Snuggerud too, eh? I mean, he
Oof,
had a
yeah.
fantastic game as well. Scored a natural hat trick in this game in the first period. I mean, he scored 3 goals before the first half of the first period was done. Like
Is that
he,
good?
it was just you look at what he's able to do, and just Snuggerud. What I've always loved about Snuggerud is he always finds a way. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be a picture perfect shot, but he always finds a way to beat the goaltender. And it's not like he doesn't have the goal scoring ability to make that work. He has a wicked shot and he's able to whistle it past goaltenders. But even dating back to his NTDP days and his draft year, what always stood out with Snuggerud is the fact that like he's just such a versatile offensive weapon. And on
Plug and
top of that,
play.
yeah, he's a plug and play player. You can put him in any role and he'll fit his it's the adaptability with Snuggerud. He molds the way he plays to kind of adapt to what his team needs, what his line needs, what the situation needs. And I covered this on my personal YouTube channel in a video for Connor Bedard. It is so important to be adaptable. It's one of the things that like if you're elite in that area, you're going to be an elite NHLer. I don't think Snuggerud's an elite adaptable player, but I think he's going to make a fantastic long-term second line player, especially as a complementary piece to a playmaker. And we know St. Louis has those. Yeah, it's good.
He's an excellent fit in that blue system. Like St. Louis fans are going to adore him for the next decade and beyond. Like he's
Yeah,
a great, great fit. And as you said, there are already some really good playmakers in place in that organization, which will really, really help him continue to develop his goal scoring game. But I do still think that the playmaking game is underrated, which has not all been apparent in this tournament. He's been used like exclusively as a shooter
as a goal
for the
scorer.
States,
Yeah,
but when put in a position with a sniper where like his coaches are also asking him to be that dual threat, he's a
yeah,
really, really capable playmaker. And I've seen him like pull off some of like the craziest passes from that 2022 draft class if I'm thinking back to scouting that year.
yeah.
So yeah, he's a very fun player.
Absolutely, but we have to talk about one of the more disappointing performances so far. Lane Hudson didn't get a single point in this 11-3 win, and he had opportunities to, but I really thought Lane Hudson was not there today. This was not the same player from just a couple games ago when he was playing in BU, or the game he played against Canada was even like miles better than what he was doing in this game. I mean, he coughed up pucks a lot. He was getting beat to below the goal line to on retrievals, and struggled physically, struggled in terms of his breakout game. I mean, beyond just not getting points, he wasn't effective in this game like he usually is. I really hope that turns around. It's an 11-3 blowout against Switzerland, not the end of the world if you play your worst game then. But it is a bigger deal if you start playing more important games and struggling. So I really hope we see an improved Lane Hudson in future games. And fun fact, Jacob Fowler got an assist in this game. The goaltender, the Habs prospect playing in net for the USA in this game, who found out he was playing an hour before the game started, managed to outscore Lane Hudson in an 11-3 blowout. That's just it's ridiculous. But we
Yeah,
also have to talk about the Sweden Germany game. I thought that was a really interesting game, and I think the score can be misleading, and
I
even the
agree.
shot totals can be misleading there, right?
For sure. I thought Germany played an excellent game here yet again. Like they had the exact same game plan that they had against Finland and they executed it just as well. They just
Yeah,
came up against a more skilled opponent and Germany was in this game for the vast majority of it. Like they only like fell down like more than 2 goals like well into the third period, right? Like
yeah,
it was a decent amount into the game. So they were only behind 1 goal for the basically the first half of the game. So they were constantly in it from a score basis and also in terms of how they were playing, they were creating chances, and they weren't the prettiest chances usually, but they were getting towards the net and
yeah,
creating opportunities. I thought that Thelin had a great game in net for Sweden. He stopped some really good opportunities from the low slot. But yeah, I thought Julian Lutz for Germany was really impressive.
yeah,
Not perhaps the most like the player with a ton of finesse to his game, but the power and the overall desire to progress the puck up the ice, no matter what obstacles stand in his way, is just a
yeah,
lot of fun to watch and to scout.
yeah. He's
But
passionate.
for sure, and this was overall a good game for Germany. But Sweden, when those floodgates opened, the amount of skill from every part of that lineup
Yeah,
that came to the forefront was spectacular.
that's what stood out. I mean, line after line after line of and it just builds and it builds, and it was inevitable. I mean, Germany built a strong dam, but it was bound to break. Like there was no stopping that flood. I mean, they just the way Sweden attacks in waves is ridiculous. And Otto Stenberg scoring a hat trick, icing on the cake. This kid, every single turn, every single Swedish turn, every time he plays for Sweden, every time he dons the Tre Kronor, he gets out there and does something ridiculously good. And this was another example of that. He is just he's money for Sweden, and I love that he's on in this tournament. I love that he's playing with Felix Ingersorum. I think that's a fantastic combination of skills, and yeah, this was a fantastic game for the pair of them. But that wraps things up for our second segment. We'll get into our third, where we break down the 3 stars for both days, along with some honorable mentions as well. Make sure to stick around till the end to that. We'll get into that after these messages from our sponsors over at FanDuel.
As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And you can use those on anything, ranging from spreads to player props to over and unders and far more. Whether you want to bet on your favorite team to win the Super Bowl this year, or your least favorite quarterback to throw a couple interceptions against maybe your favorite team in the upcoming weeks. The choice is yours with FanDuel. So visit fanduel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Alrighty, it's 3 stars time. Let's get it. Let's get it started with the 3 stars from day 2 of action. We'll talk about some of these games that were really interesting, and there were so many names that we could have chosen from. But I think we can start with the honorable mention for Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
Philip Dietl in net for Germany was key in their win against Finland. He was the key element that helped them win that game. I would have also loved to see Julian Lutz in this conversation, because just simply for the fact that he high-fived the penalty box guy. I mean, that's money. He was in the penalty box when Germany ended the game and won the game 4-3, and he was banging on the glass before the clock ended, and then the moment his teammates celebrate, he goes over to the penalty box guy, gives him a high five, the box opens, and he goes and joins his teammates on the other side. What a moment. I feel like that's going to be replayed often, even after this year. I think that's going to be a moment that comes back. But let's talk about Adam Gajan. Oh my goodness, like he was ridiculous against Switzerland. And I know Switzerland just got absolutely pummeled and, didn't look the best against Team USA. They weren't playing the
But it's
same
Team
against
USA.
Slovakia. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they even played differently against Slovakia. Like they were a
And it was
lot
a
more
back to
aggressive.
back, right? Like
Exactly.
there are many factors here that made
Absolutely.
the fact that Switzerland even scored 3 goals against the States is really impressive in
Yeah.
today's games. But Adam Gajan, as you said, he single-handedly won that game for Slovakia. Very different Slovakian performance from that first game, but they didn't need much more because Adam Gajan won them those points. But
Mhm.
for the second start of the game, kind of the flip side, where the first game of the tournament was pretty difficult, as we talked about in the last episode, but he came back with a hat trick, Yuri Kulik.
Absolutely. What a game for him. I really thought he was the best player for Czechia. And I'm so happy to see that because I'm a huge fan of Yuri Kulik. I was genuinely disappointed in his last game against Slovakia, not just with his performance, but his reaction in the interview in the second period. And in this game, there was no doubt about it. He was the key element of this Czech team and showed what he can do when he's on. Like this is a Yuri Kulik I want to see every game because I'm sure that game against Slovakia doesn't end 6-2 if he's playing that way. But yeah, I really loved his game. But as a first star, we have to go with the number one. I mean, indisputed at this point, number one overall pick in the 2024 NHL
Yeah.
draft. Macklin Celebrini with a 5-point performance against Latvia. Again, in under 14 minutes of play. That has to change. That has to change. But yeah,
We are
just
banging on the tables here. Come on, Team Canada, please. Just
I
play
like
more. It'll
oh my
make your
god.
team better and it'll make fans happier. It's a win-win.
Yeah, like it has to change. I don't think even Team Canada in their typically set ways and in conservative lineups and all of that. Still, I mean, you have to see what Celebrini's doing and reward that. Like, what message are you sending to your team if you're not right? Put him in a
Yeah.
situation where he's your key guy because he can be that, and we're all looking forward to seeing it. But yeah, I really thought that beyond just the I mean, we know how good Celebrini's shot is, right? I think there's no doubt about that. But in that game against Latvia, he showed how refined of a playmaker he is. And the way he just attacks relentlessly off the rush, time and time again, he never gives you a break. He always backs you up. He always keeps you on your toe, on your heels, and makes you wonder what his next move's going to be. So often he cuts to the middle, finds space, backs players up, fakes a shot, goes to a pass, relays it to a player that no one saw coming. Like there were so many examples. Like everything about his rush game just screams elite NHLer. And if you can get him on a line that's built around that, a line that's able to just
Oh God.
consistently attack downhill, he's going to be a menace. But yeah, those are the 3 stars for Wednesday. Let's get into Thursday. Some interesting names. We have to shout out Zeev Buyum.
Zeev.
Oh my goodness! With Lane Hudson not stepping up to the plate, one offensive defenseman in that lineup, one of the many that they have, needed to step up, and boy did Zeev Buyum ever. Has this game kind of shifted your opinion of him a tiny bit?
Not really. I mean, I think it would take a lot for a game against Switzerland to really shift my opinion too much. But I'm also saying that because my opinion has been shifting very consistently over the last month with every viewing I get. So it's not
Yeah,
like this game specifically has changed a ton.
yeah,
But we are seeing like, he showcased the exact same strength that he has been showcasing increasingly over the last 2 months. And
yeah.
the mobility, the skating that he uses at this point, mainly offensively to create to create those advantages and to create separation and to use it as a playmaking tool as well. He loves to drag out defenders, create that space for his attackers to kind of fade into. But defensively, he looked a lot better in this game than the last couple viewings I've had of Zeev Williams, where you kind of want him to use his skating a little bit more effectively to close gaps, be more aggressive, and overall play a more like composed and efficient defensive game
Yeah.
where you're not giving your opponents much space, because any defenseman with the skating of Zeev Williams should not be giving opponents
Oh
much
yeah.
space. But that has also been progressing pretty consistently this season. So Zeev Williams is, I think, he's a shoe-in for the top 10 in our eyes at this point, at the very
Oh
least.
yeah. There's
And
no doubt.
and he's definitely creeping up into that top defenseman of the draft discussion. I think I'm still personally partial to Zane Parekh there, but that gap is a lot tighter now than it was even like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, he's dethroned Sam Dickinson for me. He's been absolutely
Wow.
ridiculous, and yeah, he if he's not the first defenseman off the board for me, he's going to be the second. I don't think there are two better defensemen than him in this draft. But moving on to the 3 stars, we have to talk about Otto Stenberg, of course, who scored a hat trick. Really fantastic game for him, and again, every time he dons the yellow and blue, he does something special. He loves playing international tournaments, and yeah, just a great Swede, just a really great Swede,
He's a
especially at this
great sweet.
tournament. Yeah.
And he's like the Adam Guyana forwards. Like he just pops off in every international tournament. Like that
Yep.
that that yellow jersey just does it all for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And second and first stars, both Americans. Jimmy Snuggerud is our second star. I know he scored a natural hat trick, but outside of that, he didn't play as complete a game, in my opinion, as Frank Nazar did, who is our first star of the games on Thursday. And yeah, so well deserved. Again, that was a playmaking masterclass. Like every single example you'd like to clip and teach young players to show them how to create passing lanes for themselves, how to identify passing lanes, the scanning habits, and the off puck habits as well. Everything about what Nazar did in this game, playmaking wise and off the puck, I would clip and send to kids to learn. Like it was amazing. It was an absolutely fantastic game from Nazar. And again, flowers to Snuggerud. I loved this game as well. Not a lot of players can say they scored a natural hat trick within the first 10 minutes of a game, but
In the World Juniors.
yeah, in the World Juniors. But masterclass for Frank Nazar. The Hawks have a really good prospect here. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They got all your news and updates about what's going on in sports on a 24/7 hour news channel. And make sure to tune in as we continue our prospect coverage starting on December 1st. This has been Hadi Kalakash with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.